Okay, so the second semi-final at the Women's Rugby World Cup has just finished at Ashton Gate in Bristol. England have beaten France 35 points to 17. It was only 7-5 in favour of England at half-time, and that first, I'm going to say the first 60 minutes, it, even though some of the tries scored were really, really good, for large phases of play it was very scrappy. A lot of handling errors, a lot of penalties. The scrum was a mess, although England did have dominance in the scrum, and they were the dominant forward pack in that area of the game. A lot of reset scrums, which was frustrating. I think both sides, there's obviously going to be nerves there, but I think both sides underestimated the damp, slippery conditions a little bit, and they didn't adjust their game. Both sides were willing to try and be expansive, yes, potentially the wrong conditions to try that expansive game. However, in saying that, the French did trouble England with their offloading and trying to keep their rock speed quick. That did trouble England, and they did expose England. They did expose them. Let's be honest. Condé's 2 tries really did expose England in the wider areas. England got very narrow defensively there. There's a disallowed try for France. There's 2 disallowed tries for England. Two of the disallowed tries are for forward passes, and one's for a knock-on. Ellie Kildunne missed the quarter-final after basically suffering a concussion, was stood down, had a very, very good game, and her 2 tries are absolutely brilliant. Her first try, the handling skills from forwards and backs down a very narrow blind side to get Kildunne the ball, especially that final pass from Bottoman, who's a prop. Props should not be offloading like that. That's what we're always taught to believe and told to believe, but no, that's some really good communication, interplay and trust in the passer and the receiver. That is built upon a lot of training grounds, handling skills and trust and communication. And in a very tight channel, they score a very, very good try after just 5 minutes. And the sidestep as well that is confidence from a player who hasn't necessarily played at her best in this World Cup. I think everyone can agree on that. Now, Condé's try in response, it does take a good 20 minutes, but the French dominate the possession for large portions of this game, especially the first half. They had over 60% of the possession and the majority of the territory. England couldn't get out their half or build phases for a lengthy period because they just got scrappy. They got sloppy, scrappy, and were forcing plays and weren't at their best. And I think the French were unsettling them. There was definitely a bit of needle in this game. There's definitely a rivalry between these two nations in the women's game. These are two sides that don't like each other very much. And Condé's try in 24 minutes, eventually they get over the line. But what happens is England get very, very narrow defensively, and it creates a very natural wide overlap. And eventually, just through weight of pressure, France score. But Condé's 2 tries from that outside centre channel, admittedly they're on either side of the field, one on the left, one on the right. This is on the right-hand side. It's very, very similar. They force England to a narrow defensive position, and England are defending very, very narrow, and there's too much width there, and that has got to be a concern for England going into the final against Canada, is how defensively they were exposed for 2 of France's tries. Now, the disallowed try for England in the first half for the knock-on, for most of that first half, England, even though they were leading 7-5, they were on the back foot. Obviously, the conversion is missed. It is a knock-on. It took too long, I think, to get that check right. I think it did take a bit too long. It's scrappy. It's just it was one of those games where an incident like that, where it becomes a ping ball and the bar of soap, and slippery and greasy, that's on 29 minutes. If that try stands, the momentum swings. But then France have a try disallowed very shortly afterwards from Ménager, forward pass. And if that try stands again down that right hand on the French right, England's left, where Breach is defending over on that side, England are exposed again, and forward pass. The replays I don't think were conclusive enough. We didn't get to see enough of them, so we have to go with what the on-field officials have seen. And again, that's another momentum swing. And so, on the balance of play, actually France were the better side. England were being tested defensively. They were holding out, obviously, the most of the time. They were helped, obviously, with a disallowed try, but they were getting exposed in their wide channels. They were getting sucked in very narrow, and out wide overlaps were forming. On the England side of things in attack, they didn't build enough phases together. Apart from their try and their disallowed try in that first half, they just could not build enough possession and enough phases. And France were allowed to dictate and dominate the territory and possession. The only area where England were having much joy was in the scrum. Everywhere else, in the contact area, the breakdown was quite even. Line out in the loose. England were doing more defending than France, but it was pretty an even contest. Just France were playing in more threatening areas down in England's half. That's basically how the first half was. I think the French were unlucky to go in behind. You could argue they could have scored a couple of tries at various points. They overplayed their hand a little bit or didn't select the right passing option at the right time. And of course, with 3 key players out, that is going to have an impact and a bearing on a performance. And you know, Canada, for example, would have potentially taken those opportunities. And considering how Canada played last night, I think England have to play better in a week's time. Now, the second half, very similar to the first, another disallowed try. And this time it's England with a forward pass. I think this one, looking at the few replays we got watching, I was watching online on the iPlayer, but on live footage, I think just forward from Kildunne to Dow, I think, and again, the officials were in line with that, and they were very, very quick to pull it up for a forward pass. But you could see that at the start of the second half, the momentum had swung a little bit, and England were doing what France had done in the first half, and they were the ones now starting to get on top of the possession very, very quickly. They started the second half very quickly. Kane gets her try in 46 minutes. So while they butcher a try, they do get, and that's from a driving maul, they do get their first try of the second half. That rolling maul is a weapon that England use very, very well. And look, it was a forward battle today, and the French maul as well. Both sides were utilising their line-out set piece very well. England adjusted their catcher and how they set up the maul, but they marched France over the line. That was a well-worked forward set play. Well worked. And they deserved that try, and Harrison converts it. Now, Arbe scores on the wing after 52 minutes, again in a wide area. They had an advantage, so even if she hadn't scored, they were going to go back for a penalty. And all 3 French tries really exposed England in the wide areas. And I think that is a concern, that England gets sucked in very narrow defensively. And the French have clearly done their homework looking at England's games in this tournament and in their build-up games before the tournament. They did play each other, of course. And they've looked and analysed the footage in this World Cup cycle, basically. They've clearly worked out, with the amount of games they play in the Six Nations, for example, in the World 15, they've clearly analysed that. It is an area of concern. That was on 52 minutes. And when England scored, France scored. They'll go and try for try at this point. Then England get that little bit of control. England wake up. So Ward gets her try in 59 minutes and Kildunne gets her second try. Yes, there's a fortunate... The kick through, could the French player have just volleyed that out? Controlled it better? Tried to handle the ball? I don't know. But it does ping ball around. Kildunne picks it up and it's a solo try. You've got to ride your luck a little bit. And Kildunne's had a very, very good game in the loose and with her kicks and runs and bringing other players into play. The Kildunne performance, I think she was one of the better England players. Although there's a slight injury concern and maybe a leg muscular issue. She was limping towards the end of the game, which has got to be a worry, as Kildunne is the best fullback option that England have. And they didn't look as good against Scotland without Kildunne in the side. I think Kildunne adds something that other players who can cover the fullback position just don't. The lines she runs, the communication, the handling skills, joining making natural overlaps when she basically appears as a second winger out wide out of the centre channel, and that she chases through the kick. It is a speculative kick from Harrison. It's well done, and Ward's try as well. That summed up the England forward performance in that second half. They had to start fighting back because that first half they were scrappy under pressure. Condé's second try, very similar to her first, it's on the other side of the field. Again, England just getting so narrow. And I know France were desperate at this point because time is running out and they were getting desperate. And fair play to the French, they didn't give up. You could see that the desperation was still there. It's just those 2 tries in between Arbe's try and Condé's second tries where England win the game. They had a good 20-minute spell in that second half where England win the game. And took control of the game after an indifferent performance. But again, England sucked in narrow and France exposing them out wide again in those wide wing outside centre channels. And that's got to be a concern, is when they're getting sucked into these rucks and mauls and in the tight middle third tramline of the pitch, basically. They're getting sucked in, and France held their width for all 3 of their tries, and they're rewarded with 3 tries with the outside backs in those wider tramline channels. They don't get the conversion on 2 of their 3 tries, which I think also, when you're trying to keep the scoreboard ticking over, that hurts a little bit. Now, Meg Jones scores basically right at the death. Again, another kick through. It bounces off the post, and again, it's one of those days where you've got to ride your luck. And the breakdown area, I mean, your outside centre is basically in defence, and at breakdown, like having a 3rd or 4th back rower on the field, like an extra flanker or an extra number 8 kind of situation at breakdown. And at the breakdown, Jones was pretty much like an extra back row forward. Won so many turnovers, and defensively put in her tackles. Fully deserved a try for her efforts, and it sort of puts a bit of gloss on the scoreline, because I do think it was a much closer game than the scoreline suggested. Areas where England need to improve. Penalty count was too high, and defensively they are getting exposed a little bit in the wide channels. They're getting very narrow at times, which is a bit of a concern. France, you've got to give them credit. They tried. They didn't back down from the battle, but in the last 10 years they haven't beaten England now. The head-to-head's going in England's favour massively. There's been a gulf and growth in between the 2 sides in regards to results and head-to-head. Since England last won the World Cup, the momentum and the head-to-head's gone in England's favour massively. But the French really gave it everything. They nearly beat them in the Six Nations, of course, in that decider earlier in the year. They gave it everything. They've obviously got a fierce rivalry. There was some needle in the game. There was a couple of little minor flashpoints. These are 2 sides that don't like each other. But at the moment, looking at the 2 semi-finals and the World Cup up to this point, I would say Canada, in my opinion, are the favourites, not England. I would say Canada are playing better than England. Canada had better discipline in their semi-final against New Zealand than England. England, winning team, look at that penalty count. That is a problem. The way Canada's ruck speed works, England might have some problems. England were tested by France at times, and look at the tries they conceded in those wide areas. Canada have pace and power in their wide areas and attacking threats. So I think it's going to be a fun final in a week's time. But yeah, England have won 35 points to 17, and Ellie Kildunne, good to see her back on the field, but potentially a leg injury there, potentially muscular. Looks like she's tweaked something. Hopefully it's not serious, and a bit of rest and recuperation, because I think she's crucial to England's attack as well. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. I'm really looking forward to the final in a week's time, and we'll do a review of the tournament as well, and how I think the game can improve and where it has improved, because I do think the women's game has come on leaps and bounds. There's still areas for improvement, but from me for now, thank you very much for watching, and I'll have some more content for you all very, very soon.